Some real crime tales are so horrific that they make our skin crawl. These are the ones where seemingly mundane events take a terrifying twist. Sarah Boone and Jorge Torres Jr.'s tale is one example. They were an imperfect pair whose doomed romance was set in stone by a game that seemed benign at the time. Tragically, one companion was found dead and the other is now facing murder charges, all because of a night of drinking and lighthearted conversation. More than just a story of a poorly planned prank, this instance serves as a stark warning about the disastrous consequences of ignoring poisonous relationships and unsolved conflicts. Our investigation into the Sarah Boone case today will take us to a place where we must ask, at what point does a joke become something far darker? In February 2020, a shocking 911 call from Winter Park, Florida, sent chills through the hearts of first responders. On the other end of the line was a frantic woman named Sarah Boone, who claimed she had found her boyfriend, Jorge Torres Jr., unresponsive inside a suitcase. Her voice trembled as she explained that what started as a playful hide-and-seek game had gone horribly wrong. But as investigators dug deeper into the events of that night, they uncovered a story far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Sarah and Jorge had been in a tumultuous relationship, marred by frequent arguments and incidents of domestic violence. Despite their toxic dynamic, the two remained together, their bond seemingly unbreakable yet deeply flawed. The night that would end Jorge's life was supposed to be just another evening of drinking and unwinding at home. But what happened next would leave everyone questioning the true nature of their relationship and whether Sarah's actions were as innocent as she claimed. Main content: the incident and evidence. Sarah told investigators that on the night of the incident, she and Jorge had been drinking heavily. According to her, they decided to play a game of hide-and-seek, a strange choice for two adults in their late 30s and 40s. Sarah said Jorge willingly climbed into a large blue suitcase, and she zipped him inside as a prank. She then claimed she went upstairs and passed out, only to wake up the next morning to find Jorge still inside the suitcase, unresponsive. But Sarah's story quickly began to unravel. When police arrived at the scene, they found Jorge's lifeless body curled up inside the suitcase, his face contorted in a mix of pain and fear. His fingernails were bloodied, evidence that he had desperately tried to claw his way out. The suitcase itself was scuffed, bearing the marks of Jorge's frantic attempts to escape his makeshift prison. Sarah's initial explanation was that it was all a terrible accident, a prank gone wrong. But when investigators reviewed Sarah's phone, they found video evidence that painted a very different picture. In the video, Jorge could be heard pleading for his life, begging Sarah to let him out of the suitcase. His voice was weak, and his breathing labored. Yet, instead of helping him, Sarah could be heard laughing, taunting him, and even saying, "This is what it feels like when you cheat on me." This video evidence was damning. It contradicted Sarah's claims that she had forgotten about Jorge in the suitcase. The recordings made it clear that Sarah was not only aware of Jorge's distress, but she also seemed to be enjoying his suffering. The image of Jorge's last moments, trapped, terrified, and alone, painted a harrowing picture of cruelty and malice. Analysis: the relationship and motive. The relationship between Sarah Boone and Jorge Torres Jr. was far from ordinary. It was a volatile mix of passion, jealousy, and constant conflict. Friends and family members of the couple were well aware of the turbulent nature of their relationship. What may have begun as a typical romance quickly devolved into a toxic cycle of arguments, reconciliations, and escalating violence. Don't miss out on our upcoming videos. Subscribe and join our community of true crime enthusiasts as we explore more chilling cases. The toxic dynamics. Sarah and Jorge's relationship was characterized by intense highs and devastating lows. They were drawn to each other in a way that often happens in toxic relationships, where love and hate seem to coexist in a destructive cycle. The couple's frequent breakups and makeups were well known among those close to them, and it wasn't unusual for their arguments to become physical. Alcohol played a significant role in their disputes. Both Sarah and Jorge had a history of heavy drinking, which only exacerbated the problems in their relationship. Alcohol often lowers inhibitions and magnifies emotions, turning minor disagreements into explosive confrontations. In their intoxicated states, What might have been a minor argument could easily spiral into a serious altercation. Jorge's family and friends noted that he was often the target of Sarah's anger and jealousy. There were accusations of infidelity on both sides, with Sarah frequently accusing Jorge of cheating on her. This paranoia and insecurity fueled the toxicity in their relationship. Sarah's possessiveness and distrust created a constant tension between them, leading to repeated clashes that were never fully resolved. On the night of the incident, it's believed that the couple's usual dynamic was in full swing. They had been drinking heavily, as was their custom, and tensions were likely high. According to Sarah, the idea of playing hide-and-seek with Jorge climbing into a suitcase was meant to be a playful joke. But in the context of their relationship, this act takes on a far more sinister tone. Sarah's decision to film Jorge while he was trapped inside the suitcase, instead of letting him out, reveals a disturbing level of cruelty. In the video, Sarah can be heard mocking Jorge, making references to his alleged infidelity. Her taunts, such as "this is what it feels like when you cheat on me," suggest that this wasn't just a prank gone wrong. It was an act of retribution. In her mind, Jorge's suffering was justified, a form of payback for the pain she believed he had caused her. The casualness with which she inflicted this torment, laughing and taunting Jorge as he pleaded for his life, points to a deep-seated anger and resentment. This was a woman who felt wronged, betrayed, and hurt, emotions that had festered over time and were now boiling over in the worst possible way. The suitcase, in this context, became a symbol of the control Sarah sought to exert over Jorge, trapping him in a situation from which he couldn't escape, just as she may have felt trapped in their tumultuous relationship. Underlying motives. Understanding Sarah's motive requires delving into the psychological complexities of abusive relationships. In many cases of domestic violence, the abuser feels a need to exert control over their partner, often as a way to compensate for their own insecurities and feelings of inadequacy. For Sarah, Jorge's alleged infidelity and the ongoing conflicts in their relationship may have triggered deep-seated fears of abandonment and betrayal. By trapping Jorge in the suitcase and filming his pleas for help, Sarah was enacting a twisted form of justice in her mind. She may have felt powerless in other aspects of their relationship, but in that moment, she held all the power. This wasn't just about a prank. It was about dominance, control, and making Jorge feel as helpless and vulnerable as she had felt. The fact that Sarah didn't immediately call for help after realizing the severity of the situation is telling. Instead of panicking or trying to save Jorge, she continued filming, indicating a disturbing disconnect from the reality of what was happening. This detachment, combined with her history of volatile behavior, suggests that Sarah's actions were driven by more than just a momentary lapse in judgment. A cycle of abuse. It's important to note that Sarah and Jorge's relationship fits the classic pattern of a cycle of abuse, where tension builds, an explosive incident occurs, and then a period of calm or reconciliation follows. In such relationships, the abuser often apologizes, promises to change, or blames the victim for provoking them, only for the cycle to repeat itself. In this case, Sarah's actions may have been the culmination of years of unresolved conflict and pent-up frustration. The prank was not an isolated incident, but rather the final, fatal manifestation of the toxic dynamics that had defined their relationship from the beginning. For Jorge, the suitcase became a coffin, and for Sarah, it became a weapon in the ultimate act of control. Legal proceedings. The aftermath. In the wake of Jorge's death, Sarah was charged with second-degree murder. During the trial, her defense tried to argue that she never intended to kill Jorge, that it was all a drunken mistake. They claimed that Sarah's judgment was impaired by alcohol and that she had genuinely fallen asleep, unaware of the dire situation unfolding downstairs. But the prosecution focused on the evidence, those haunting videos and the autopsy results, which showed that Jorge died of positional asphyxiation. The fact that Sarah had filmed Jorge's pleas for help rather than coming to his aid was central to their case. They painted Sarah as a vindictive partner who had finally taken her anger out in the most brutal way possible. The jury was left to decide. Was Sarah Boone a woman who made a tragic mistake, or was she a cold-blooded killer? After deliberating, they found her guilty of second-degree murder, a charge that would likely lead to a lengthy prison sentence. As a jailed pro-se defendant, Boone has difficulties in reviewing the evidence that supports her case. Boone was unsuccessful in his attempt to persuade Cranick to exclude the media from an upcoming evidence viewing on Wednesday. Boone told the court she was unprepared, and she said she couldn't examine the papers filed in her case because she didn't have internet connection. Pro-se detainees do not have access to the internet, according to jail staff who gave testimony. Boone argued that Judge Cranick should grant her request for a private inspection of the material in her case, citing the media's exploitation of her case for ratings and exposure as reasons. But the court found that Boone hadn't done enough to end the hearing. A different option was presented to Boone by the prosecution, however. Boone will be able to examine the material in private with the help of investigators at a police station. Only crime scene investigators are authorized to handle the evidence, and Boone has been informed that she is not permitted to do so. In the event that the plan does not materialize, Judge Cranick has retained the September 3rd hearing date. Reflection. The broader implications? The Sarah Boone case is a stark reminder of how toxic relationships can spiral into violence and tragedy. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of staying in a relationship that's filled with anger, resentment, and abuse. For Jorge Torres Jr., a night of what should have been harmless fun turned into a nightmare from which he couldn't escape. And for Sarah Boone, what she described as a prank cost her more than she could have ever imagined. But this case also raises difficult questions about the nature of intent, alcohol-fueled decision-making, and the fine line between a mistake and murder. How much of what happened that night was the result of years of accumulated rage, and how much of it was a tragic misjudgment made in the heat of the moment? Conclusion. Final thoughts and sign-off. The Sarah Boone case forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the nature of human relationships and the dark impulses that can arise within them. What might appear on the surface as a tragic accident, upon closer examination, reveals a story of deep emotional turmoil, psychological manipulation, and unchecked aggression. A case study in toxic relationships, this case is a stark reminder of how toxic relationships can become a breeding ground for violence. When love turns to obsession and trust gives way to suspicion, the boundaries between affection and cruelty can blur in dangerous ways. Sarah and Jorge's relationship was a powder keg, waiting for a spark to ignite it. Unfortunately, that spark led to Jorge's untimely death, a death that might have been preventable if the signs of escalating abuse had been recognized and addressed sooner. For those of us looking from the outside in, it's easy to wonder how a situation like this could escalate to such a horrific conclusion. But for those trapped within these kinds of relationships, the reality is much more complex. The cycle of abuse, mixed with moments of love and reconciliation, can create a powerful and confusing dynamic, making it difficult for either party to break free. The impact on the community. This case also has a broader impact beyond just the individuals involved. It serves as a sobering reminder to communities, law enforcement, and social support systems about the importance of recognizing the signs of domestic violence and intervening before it's too late. Jorge's death is not just a tragedy for his family, but a call to action for all of us to pay closer attention to the warning signs that may be present in our own lives or the lives of those around us. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Sarah Boone case, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update on the latest true crime stories. The legal and moral questions. From a legal perspective, the Sarah Boone case also raises difficult questions about intent, culpability, and the nature of justice. Was Sarah's act of trapping Jorge in the suitcase a premeditated act of violence, or was it a drunken mistake? The court may have rendered its verdict, but the moral ambiguity of the case lingers. It challenges us to think about how we define intent and responsibility in situations where emotions run high and judgment is impaired. Lessons learned. There are critical lessons to be learned from this case. First and foremost, it underscores the importance of addressing the root causes of conflict in relationships before they escalate into something far more dangerous. Communication, counseling, and, in some cases, separation may be necessary to prevent such tragedies. It's a harsh reality, but one that must be faced if we are to prevent future cases like this. Furthermore, this case is a sobering reminder of the devastating consequences of untreated mental health issues, substance abuse, and unresolved emotional trauma. In the end, What might seem like isolated incidents are often the result of long-standing issues that have been allowed to fester. Sign off. A call to reflect and act. The Sarah Boone case is a chilling example of how quickly things can go wrong and how deadly the consequences can be when toxic dynamics are left unchecked. It forces us to look at the dark side of human relationships, the impact of domestic violence, and the fine line between a tragic mistake and a calculated act of cruelty. As we reflect on this case, it's crucial to consider how we can better support those in our communities who may be struggling with similar issues. Whether it's offering a listening ear, encouraging professional help, or intervening when we see signs of abuse, each of us has a role to play in preventing tragedies like this from happening again. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.